started my career here at the NASA Marshall Space Flight Center in January 1973 as a cooperative education student from Alabama A&M University. As a matter of fact, we are now in Building 4207, Central Communications. This is the facility where I started my career. Spent the first 14 years here. My first job here was a telecommunications specialist, where we helped to provide administrative communications for the agency for all the other NASA centers. So that was my first job here at the NASA Marshall Space Flight Center. I initially started here in telecommunications, but as my career progressed, I started doing other jobs. Initially, I was a program analyst here in telecommunications. Then eventually got a position in the facilities office as a program analyst officer. Then I actually came back here after telecommunications and the computer services office merged to become the information systems office. I headed up the resources management branch. I did that job for several years. I eventually got a position as director of the business management office for what is now the Center Operations Directorate. After that job, the position for the Equal Opportunity Office came open. I was encouraged to apply for that position and was selected for it in the mid-90s. And I served in that position for about 6.5 years. Yes, after that, I was selected for the Senior Executive Service Candidate Development Program, which was about an 18-month leadership development program. After graduating from that program, I was selected as the Director of Center Operations at the Glen Research Center. That's where I entered into the Senior Executive Service. I headed that organization for a couple of years, and the position of the Deputy Director of Center Ops came open here back in Huntsville, so it was an opportunity for me to get back home to Huntsville. I came back. 10 months later, I was asked to go to NASA headquarters, where I headed up the Institutions and Management Directorate as Associate Administrator. I served in that capacity for 7 months, and then was selected as the Associate Deputy Administrator for the agency. And that's the position I held until retiring in December 2010. I graduated from Livingston High School in 1971. I applied to Alabama A&M, which was where my sister and one of my brothers attended, so it was just following the family tree. Got to Alabama A&M, and actually it was my first exposure to a lot of diversity. I grew up in an all African-American community in Sumter County. Except for my junior year in high school, I attended all black schools. My junior year, I actually attended basically an all white high school that were like 18 black students and several hundred white students. But the very next year, I attended the same school. There were several hundred black students and 2 white students. All of the white kids transferred to a private school for that year. It's called the Sumter Academy. I assume it's still there. So when I arrived at Alabama A&M, although it's an HBCU, we had, and I believe still have, a lot of students from different countries around the world. And that was really my first interaction with a lot of people different from me, actually. So it was my first foray into diversity. Well, like most students, I needed funding. So one of my friends from Livingston High School that we were in college together, he stopped by my dorm room and said he was going to go down and apply for the co-op program. And when you apply, you don't know where you might get an assignment. So when the co-op coordinator interviewed me, he said, based on your background, we have two possible positions for you. One of them, I believe, was in New Hampshire at a submarine facility. And he said, the other one is here at NASA Marshall Space Flight Center. Which one would you like to pursue? And I said, let me think. I'll take the one here. So having no idea what the position would be, that is how I got selected and checked in here. Personnel asked me to go down and get my badge from security. On my way down, I saw this building that we're sitting in now, building 4207. I said, that looked like a neat facility. I'd love to work there. And I went back to personnel and got my assignment. It was in this building, Central Communications. So it was a neat start, and I really enjoyed working here because it was really on the forefront of advanced communications. So I was kind of marvel at the way things work, alternate telecommunications, routing, and that kind of stuff. So it was a great experience. I never wanted to leave. Okay. A lot of mentors, but I didn't really call it that because I didn't even realize that's what it was. A lot of people that, for whatever reason, took an interest in me. Gentleman Jack Palmer, who worked in finance, and Jim Jennings, who at that time was working out at the Kennedy Space Center. Clyde Foster, who was EO director here. My first boss, Charlie Brand, who was a retired Navy chief. As I reflect back, it was a very good mentoring that they were doing for me. But again, I didn't, when you're 19 years old, you don't really see it as that. And as my career progressed, a lot of people from around the agency, for whatever reason, took what is now I know as a special interest. It's me, Dr. Julian Earls from the NASA Glen Research Center, Dr. Woodrow Whitlow, who is also at Glen Research Center. People that talked to me about various opportunities and things that I needed to do to position myself as opportunities became available during my NASA career. Actually, I'm very encouraged at the state of STEM education, particularly from a NASA perspective. One thing about NASA, even when I was a NASA employee, NASA didn't leave the development of the STEM pool up to the education system, so to speak. NASA was always involved in growing the STEM pool of young graduates, young people, because they knew, eventually that is what it would take to sustain the agency. So NASA funding, and still today, has a lot of outreach, even at the elementary stage throughout high school and college, and encouraging STEM education. And when I worked here, NASA invested a lot in minority education for STEM students. I remember a lot of students that attended Morehouse and Spelman colleges that earned dual degrees from Georgia Tech and Spelman and Morehouse. The agency actually didn't hire a lot of the graduates, but they were in the engineering and science community that was available, for NASA to consult with or bring in as time and funding permitted. So today, I'm still encouraged. We don't see a lot in the news cycle about a lot of students who's pursuing STEM education, but I am highly, highly encouraged. Alabama A&M, where I attended their new School of Engineering, are producing a lot of STEM students as well as doctoral students, particularly in physics. So I think the state it's better than it used to be and continues to improve. There were definitely challenges. The pool of minority employees were very small. Um, but the thing you focused on in those days is just doing your job, doing it as best you can do it, and as well as you could do it, to take that excuse off the table in terms of growth. So when opportunities did become available, you could that excuse was eliminated. You focused on your job. At the same time, you talked to people in the community about letting them know when positions would come available and to encourage people to apply. There were instances where I thought things might have been unfair due to non-merit-based issues. But again, you didn't focus on it. You continued to focus on your job and to do it as best you could, and help other people navigate difficulties that may encounter here. But for the most part, it's a highly technical community. Most of the people that worked here were not from here, so that helped a lot. I knew of him. I knew some of the great work he was doing in helping EEO and as importantly, diversity, because those two things are different. One, EEO helps get you into the workforce. Diversity helps you manage more of a diverse workforce, and Clyde was certainly on the forefront of that. As I grew here in the first 5 to 10 years, I got to know him a lot better, and we would have conversations. Again, it was pure mentoring and sharing some of the things that he experienced here in the early 60s when he started to work here. But yeah, he was a giant in the NASA community. James, he was and is and always will be a giant in the NASA community. Really forward-thinking, both strategically and tactical thinker. He has helped hundreds of people of all stripes, so to speak, and he shared his experience. He talked about things that you need to do and the difficulty. He's also the one that it would encourage you to don't hesitate to take different jobs, whether it's here or at any other NASA center, knowing that it may be difficult family-wise, but figure out a way to do it to help build your resume. But he is a giant. If there was a NASA Hall of Fame, he would be in it. You have to work at it. I can recall, talking to managers about, they would tell me the difficulty they were having in finding minority candidates for certain positions, and I would ask them where were they going to recruit, and Auburn, Mississippi State, or whatever, where you get great engineering students. But you got to look beyond that, and I think NASA does that now, and it does it quite well, to go out and look for different places to find excellent students in the STEM world. NASA does a good job to send engineers out, to talk to colleges and universities, even programs where NASA employees actually go out and teach, and sending employees that looks like the students they're trying to recruit. So those things are tremendously helpful. I am also encouraged that, the NASA education group at NASA headquarters keeps the focus on where managers need to go to recruit, keep the focus on developing STEM candidates, identifying where they might be, and taking managers there to talk to students. So NASA is very involved, and I'm highly encouraged that they will continue to be the leader among government agencies in STEM education. Well, again, there's one thing in hiring diverse employees. There's another thing in managing diverse employees. The leadership theory used to be treat everybody the same, which doesn't work because people are different. When you have a diverse pool of employees, you need to understand what motivates them based on their own background and where they may come from. So treating everybody exactly the same just doesn't work anymore. I would highly encourage all leaders to get to know the employees and find out what motivate each of them. It takes a lot of work, it takes a lot of time, but at the end of the day, it helps produce a better product.